you may want to be treated if you think you have a really bad, infection that you happen to eat from a contaminated piece of meat or something. So yeah, and then a lot of these things can be treatable easily.
Well, they're not always reported on a daily basis. There are certain diseases in New York State that are reportable. Some are bacterial, some are not. They're reported by hospital infection control nurses, by practitioners. They're reported by labs, so it becomes called involuntary. Labs know that certain diseases are reported. And so they're reported as they come through, but we put them out as a report on a monthly and an annual basis. So in pure numbers, the two commonest bacterial infections that are reportable are chlamydia, which is a sexually transmitted disease, by far the commonest, and Lyme disease, which is an equal opportunity kind of bacteria. It affects everybody of all ages, all socio-economic groups. That's caused by Borrelia burgdorferi, and that's those and the commonly known ones out in the community, which are things like Staph aureus, which cause little pustules, etc., and strep pyogenes, which causes strep throat. Clearly, the commonest and most useful thing that people can do to protect themselves from bacteria and viruses is hand washing. And we've got very slack about that until H1N1 came along this fall. So I think now we've got everybody geared up with hand sanitizers and hand washing, and I think that it's got a lot better. And we have a little healthy orange guy that normally is encouraging you not to smoke and not to to exercise and eat healthy. He's also doing. This is a multi-county logo. We have a logo so it's instantly recognizable, and many counties that have a high prevalence of Lyme disease and tick-borne illnesses. So we put out a lot of material. We put out little kits on how to remove ticks. We put a lot of posters up, that kind of thing. And we're always having people out in the public, in schools, etc., talking about some of these things. Chlamydia, probably not quite so much, because we don't do as much sexual education except in STD clinic. But clearly using condoms is a good way to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. So hand washing, avoiding ticks, removing them appropriately, doing a daily tick check. Well, the other thing I think people need to do is realize that at any one date, a bacteria or a virus will only affect people based on the host and the bacterium at the time. It's an interaction between the host and the bacterium. So if you keep yourself healthy, if you get enough rest, if you eat enough fruits and vegetables, if you get enough exercise, if you're generally in a good resistance situation, you're a little less likely to pick up all these other things as well, that and hand washing. So it's not only protecting yourself from exposure, it's helping your host body resist infection as well. For example, every season 15 to 20% of the population on average gets flu, seasonal flu. Not everybody gets it, although most people are exposed at one point or another.
I think that the most prevalent forms of bacterial infections that my patients and the public in general face today probably are throat infections and respiratory infections. Strep throat, certainly the most common bacterial infection of the throat, and strep pneumonia, the most common form of pneumonia that I see in this office. Clearly there are also relatively common infections of the skin caused by bacterial infections that also are right up there among the most common infections we see. Symptoms of bacterial infections of the throat are surprising to many people, not the most terrible sore throat that you would expect. The really, really painful sore throats are most commonly viral infections. Strep throat, the most common bacterial infection of the throat, its most common symptoms are mild sore throat, feverish feeling, bad taste in the mouth, a lot of nausea, sometimes a skin rash is associated with it, and more generalized symptoms, just a feeling of being very, very sick. Symptoms of bacterial pneumonia, it usually hits one quite abruptly with high fever, what we call a productive cough, meaning a cough that results in a lot of sputum coming up. That's very often rust-colored sputum. Again, high fever, feeling of being very, very sick and flu-like. And skin infections are, again, also among the most common infections caused by bacteria. present as redness, warmth to the touch, and sometimes ulcerations and a purulent discharge from the skin. All bacterial infections, regardless of which body part we're talking about, are treated with antibiotics. Clearly different antibiotics are used depending on what type of bacterial infection we're talking about. But antibiotics is the answer, along with the more obvious things such as lots of rest, plenty of fluids, and generally those conditions dictate the need to do those things and make it pretty obvious. The obvious precautions that people should take to prevent bacterial infections are frequent hand washing and avoiding others who have symptoms of the infections as I described up till this time. That's not always so easy to do. Those who work in the public, who commute in a situation where there's a lot of people in a small area, such as a train or a bus or a subway. Teachers, for example, who work in schools where there's lots of kids around. Anybody who works in an area where there's just lots of other people around. It's going to be hard to avoid sick people, unfortunately. But there are other things I think that people should know that they can do to avoid infection. I have really learned from experience, both personal experience and with my patients, that really good health maintenance is an immune booster. And I find that people who have good diets, keep their weight close to the recommended weights for their height, and who exercise, especially exercise on a regular basis, that these things are immune boosters and really improve your chances for avoiding infection. Just general health maintenance, especially exercise, frequent hand washing, or these antimicrobial gels, such as Purell, for example, although there's many brands available now. I truly do believe in the importance of these techniques for avoiding infection.